All right, Angela. So thanks so much for taking the time to be here today. We're going to go over, talk a little bit about what neurofeedback is and then how Neuroptimal is different, and then share obviously a lot of your wisdom and experience that you've seen over the years from actually working with people. But before we dive into all that, maybe just take a few minutes and introduce us to kind of who you are and what you do now and kind of what you're up to these days.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. So, I got involved in neurofeedback, Neuroptimal specifically about 12 years ago. So, after going through cancer treatments in my early 30s, and it helped me with anxiety and chemo brain and depression and all these different sleep, all these different issues that I was dealing with. So, after it resolved all that for me, I just really felt like there was a need for this, especially for young people coming out of cancer treatments when they were only handed a prescription drug to deal with the issues I was dealing with. So I decided to get trained and start a business offering it for others.
Hmm.
And so started that, and I've kind of worked in all different fields over the last decade. I've worked in an oncology office with Neuroptimal. I've had my own center. I've worked with professional athletes, kids on the autism, ADHD spectrum, everything in between. And in 2020, opened a sort of a biohacking center called the Bay Area Brain Spa in San Francisco Bay Area. And so we obviously didn't know what was going to happen with the whole shutdown and how long it was going to last. So it's been an
Yeah.
adventure, but we have grown and we have all kinds of other biohacking technologies. But the main goal of opening this center was to really make neuroptimal neurofeedback more accessible to people and really making it like, hey, you come pop in for your brain training and go about your day just like you'd jump in and go have a workout at the gym and or maybe come with friends. And so we wanted it to be like half the cost that it would be normally going in for a neurofeedback session. And so that's kind of where we are now is 3 years into this business. And then I also still rent the equipment out. So I ship the equipment, the neurofeedback equipment, all over the US and help people with consulting on purchasing and implementing it, whether it's personal or into your business. So, yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's
you.
how we met.
Yeah.
I was heard about neurofeedback, and then I found Neuroptimal, and then I was searching around, and then you came up as someone pretty close to me that was doing the rentals, and yeah, you were definitely super helpful with me through that whole process. I think I did a month unlimited,
Mm-hmm.
and answered like a ton of my questions because it was all super new and foreign to me, and so yeah, I definitely
Sure.
appreciate that, and that's how we basically connected. So aside from Neuroptimal, what other stuff are you offering at your brain?
Yeah.
What do you call it? What did you call it? A brain
The
spa
Bay
or
Area Brain Spa.
Bay Area Brain Spa? Okay.
Yeah, so I still have my other company that I do rentals through and assistance with purchasing at Mind Balance, which you rented through, and then
Right.
the Bay Area Brain Spa is a physical center, and so we have red light therapy, full body lymphatic drainage in like these compression massage suits,
Yeah.
and we do a lot of like basically we think about training your brain and flushing your lymph and charging your cells. So
Yeah.
everything is kind of goes along those lines of like biocharger, PEMF technologies, and yeah. So we have we have quite a bit of different tech at our center, but you know, a lot of people combine the lymphatic massage with the neurofeedback, and neurofeedback is still our top service for sure.
Yeah.
And we probably run like an average of like 7 or 8 systems at our center. So some people are doing it
Wow.
on their own, just neurofeedback, or they're doing it stacked with the lymphatic massage pants. So we're
So
pretty
have you
busy.
have you noticed? Because obviously you've used Neuroptimal in a lot of different situations, a lot of different use cases. Have you noticed kind of enhanced effects or different benefits from people that are doing it combined with like red light or lymphatic and like the PEMF versus just
Yeah, you know, it's so hard to say because it's
sure.
so it's different for everybody to
Yeah.
begin with. So it's so
Right.
hard to say like, oh, because you're doing red light before. I
Sure.
mean, I just feel like um, I believe that with the lymphatic massage,
Hmm.
especially because if you have a dirty lymphatic system and you've got a bunch of toxins on board,
Yeah.
your brain's not going to function very well. So
Yeah.
that's why we really encourage flushing your lymphatic system and improving your lymphatic health, because that directly affects brain health and how you perform. So yeah, I mean, I would certainly say it's a great
Of course.
combo. I just don't have any like
Yeah.
concrete evidence as to what your improvements will be based on what you stack or whatever. So
Yeah. I mean, I think regardless of what health thing we're talking about, having your fluids in your body move more efficiently is just going to help everything because
yes,
that's how things work in the body. It's how things get in. It's how things get out. That's just kind of, I mean, we are mostly fluid at the end of the
yes,
day, fluid and bacteria.
yeah,
And I'd actually made a video previously when I was talking about Neuroptimal. I mentioned it alongside people getting lymphatic drainage, like manual therapy,
hmm,
because there's a guy called Bruno Chickley who like he has this lymphatic thing that that he teaches, and then he has an actual a brain curriculum where people can
okay,
actually. It's like a really high form of like osteopathic manual therapy evolved out
oh,
of
cool,
craniosacral, where
yeah,
they're actually palpating the tissues of the brain, of the nervous system, of the spinal cord, like very subtle things. And personally speaking, I've done that stuff, and it's incredible. Like it's profoundly life changing, and at least in my mind, it's like on one hand, and obviously we'll get into in just a few minutes like what Neuroptimal is doing and how it's working, but kind of in
sure,
the short term, it's like kind of helping rebalance your nervous system. But then obviously, if you're helping the fluids move, I feel like it's kind of maybe it's definitely facilitating and maybe removing some of the resistance because it's like if you have all this, like you said, toxins or
hmm,
blocked up fluids, then your nervous system's like definitely has to deal with that. And
yes,
then definitely what I've learned from my own experience from training and doing Tai Chi and internal arts is like oftentimes the reason why the fluids in the body don't move is because the nervous system sticks or freezes or gets hung up, and then the
hmm,
fluids stagnate, and then that creates inflammation, and then the whole host of, you know, things that we don't really want to be dealing with starts to happen.
sure, yeah, yeah, and I would say also with the like on a cellular level, um, just the reason we do the red light therapy and the different PEMF technologies, and so many people are stuck inside in shoes,
Yeah.
on blue screens from the time they wake up until the time they go to bed at night. And why are we all sick? Well, that's
Yeah.
we're meant to be outside and grounding and charging our cells and seeing the different light frequencies in the morning when we wake up. And so, unfortunately, I mean, my grandfather, who was a farmer, wouldn't have needed a biocharger
Yeah.
because, he was outside farming from sunrise, so, and lived to be in his 90s. So it's kind of, rolling with our times here and trying to also educate people to do those other things for themselves as well. So,
Yeah, I think it's just really useful to kind of adapt to the world we live in now, whereas obviously in the past, probably not that necessary.
yeah.
So we've kind of touched on Neuroptimal. We've talked about neurofeedback a little bit. Could you maybe just take a couple minutes and explain at least what neurofeedback is in a general sense? Because I feel like for a lot of people, it's a weird term to begin with,
Hmm,
and
hmm,
it's not immediately obvious, kind of even what it is or what it means, or what it
sure.
even, and also what it even looks like.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, Neuroptimal is a type of neurofeedback.
Yeah.
So there's different types of neurofeedback out there, and there's linear and nonlinear neurofeedback. So there are types of neurofeedback where you might put on a whole cap and they might map the brain and say, okay, you have anxiety because this frequency is too low or whatnot. And so they'll create a specific protocol, and they're in training the brain for this specific outcome. And so that is what I would consider to be linear neurofeedback in just kind of general terms.
Mm.
Um, it's a specific protocol being pushed on the brain for a specific outcome, essentially. So, Neuroptimal, it was actually developed by practitioners who were they were kind of pioneers in the linear neurofeedback field for many years. And what they discovered was that if we tell the brain what to do, it will also do this level of self-correction on its own. And so they thought, oh, this is interesting. What if we just showed the brain what it was doing instead of telling the brain what to do? And so that's how Neuroptimal came to be. So it's very different than other types of neurofeedback, linear neurofeedback that's been around for a long time. I mean, Neuroptimal has been around for over 20 years, so it's been around, and but it's different in that it uses two little sensors on the head and ear clips, and those are just measuring the brain activity, and then it is being sent to the software, which is analyzing. There's this feedback loop. So the sensors are measuring, the software is analyzing, and it's providing real-time feedback back to the brain about what it's just done. So when the brain can see what it's doing in real time, it's prompted to self-correct and self-regulate. And what that means is different for everybody. So
Right.
we may have a client that comes in, and the first session they feel super calm and relaxed, and that night they have the deepest sleep they've had in months. Or someone walks out and the leaves are brighter on the trees, and I mean, just all kinds of different experiences. Some people have an emotional release during the session because it's deeply calming to the nervous system. And so oftentimes if people have been through a bunch of trauma, or they're just storing everything in their body and their nervous system, that calming and relaxation allows for this release for them. So kind of the responses are all over the place, but there's sort of like this general, like what we tend to see also over time.
Hmm.
I would say also I describe it to clients as like, they're like, well, how does it work though? I don't understand. And kind of like when we walk by a mirror, we might stand taller or we fix our hair, and it's not the mirror that did anything to us. The mirror didn't fix our hair or fix us so that we're standing straighter. We took that feedback in, and we automatically were prompted to fix whatever we saw because we decided that that wasn't what we wanted to see, and we wanted to make it better. So
Right.
the brain, it's like Neuroptimal is like a mirror for the brain, and reflecting back to the brain, hey, this is what you're doing right now. And the brain goes, oh yeah, I didn't need to do that. And it will get very busy self-correcting and self-regulating, and reorganizing itself. So we see, all kinds of different results, but the idea is that it's kind of training the central nervous system for greater resilience and flexibility. And so if there's a nervous system that's very dysregulated, somebody might have trouble sleeping, and maybe stress is the thing that's dysregulating the nervous system to begin with, and they're just like bogged down with stress, they're in fight or flight, and so the nervous system is just stuck and it's dysregulated, and that can result in anxiety and redundant thinking and all these different symptoms that if you calm and regulate the nervous system, those symptoms will go away. So that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense, and it's obviously sounds a lot more holistic.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think with many different disorders or adaptive strategies or dysregulations in the system, it's really easy, at least as an individual, because I can speak to this personally, and with people that I've worked with and talked to over my 15, 20 years in this industry, is like it's so easy as an individual to just go down this rabbit hole, and everything starts to seem super complicated and super nuanced, and it's like you feel different from everyone else and unique and all
Yeah.
this like complicated stuff, and then that is like a whole other barrier and a whole other obstacle at a certain point, and you just kind of feel a bit hopeless, and it's a little bit not a great place to be in. I can you know but at the end of the day, what I realized, as I got older, is really if you simplify a lot of this stuff down and clarify it, a lot of the mechanics are pretty similar
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the underlying kind of issue. The underlying mechanic or driver is very similar for many people, and obviously they can manifest in so many different ways. Because I mean, our experience is insanely subjective on so many levels. How we relate to the different senses. I taste something and it's sweet, and you taste it and it has no flavor, or I smell something and it makes me want to vomit. Another person smells it and they love it. All these crazy different things. And then
Yeah.
you talk about like your actual emotional, like deep parts of your nervous system. It's like it's a whole other thing. So it seems like just giving the body the space to chill out, calm down is kind of like, seems like the precursor for really any degree of recalibration or healing or whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely. Yeah. We get people all the time. They're like, well, my son has ADHD and my wife has this and I have this diagnosis and can it help them? And the answer is that any brain can benefit. So every brain can benefit from being more calm and regulated, like you're saying, and it changes everything. So, yeah, it doesn't matter the diagnosis. And typically we just see that symptoms improve, and a lot of times with any diagnosis there's anxiety and there's worry and those
Yep.
kind of things on board because you have this diagnosis, and so it can really help support that process, and a calm regulated nervous system is going to heal a lot easier than one that's really stressed and
Yeah,
thing.
what I realize is like in many ways the nervous system is just kind of like an electrical system in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And electrical system, it kind of have like a frequency to it or a quality to it where it's like, I've experienced times when in my life where I was super dysregulated and I've known people, it's like you can just see their nervous system is just like, it's
Mm-hmm.
just like buzzing and shaking, and there's just this dissonant sort of like nails on a chalkboard quality to it. And then of course if you're experiencing that, you start to just be like, ah, and then that just creates that whole feedback loop. So of course, the external world is just even more stressful. You're snapping at people, you have short temper, you can't focus because inside you're just like have this
Exactly.
buzz.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I realized that helped me a lot, even on my own journey. Is like, actually, I don't have to go and do all these complicated things. I just
Mm-hmm.
need to actually focus on feeling calm and feeling comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have that quality, I just notice all these other things just kind of like organized and chilled out, or just went away, or
Mm-hmm.
I forgot about them entirely. So neurooptimal, at least for me, was like a pretty really important or really important and useful part of that. Because I tried traditional neurofeedback previously for a few months,
Mm-hmm.
and I definitely felt something from it,
Sure.
but it also kind of like tweaked me out a little bit. Like I remember one session afterwards, I like was driving to a park, and like I felt great. I felt
Mm-hmm.
like different and calm, and like things are brighter. But then also like there was like a guy on the road who was riding a bike, and then it was just this like hilarious thing where the car in front of me almost cut him off or something. So this guy like starts screaming. Because I mean, I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but the people that ride their bikes in Portland
Mm-hmm.
are like aggressive a
Yeah.
lot of the time, like screaming at people.
Uh-huh.
Um, so this guy is doing this, and then I give him like a ton of space, and I drive past him. But then I felt this like rage pull up inside of me, and I'm just like, is he yelling at me? Like, is he mad at
Mm-hmm.
me? And then
Yeah.
so I just like slowed down. I noticed myself like wanting to have this confrontation. I'm like, dude, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So I just was like, whoa, I think I'm tweaked out right now from this thing to where
Mm-hmm.
it like regulated something, but then it made me just want to like rage out at the same time. I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, I don't know about this, which
Yeah.
I've never experienced that from Neuroptimal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is that, linear traditional neurofeedback can be extremely powerful and people have great results. It's that you can overshoot or have
Yeah.
something that's, doesn't land in the right place, so to speak, like maybe what you experienced. And so because with Neuroptimal, it's not putting anything in, it's just reflecting back to the brain. It can be a lot more subtle and seamless for people.
Yeah, I guess just to kind of recap a little more clearly, what would you say the key differences from neurooptimal versus normal neurofeedback? And then why would that be preferable?
Yeah, I would just say that it's 100 Neuroptimal is 100% non-invasive, and so it's not telling the brain what to do. It's not putting any frequency in, and traditional or linear neurofeedback can be any combination of those. So it can be putting a frequency into the brain, or up training frequencies or down training frequencies with these specific linear protocols. And so someone or some someone at some point made this decision that this is what's right for the brain. And with Neuroptimal, it's the brain deciding. So it's tapping into the intrinsic wisdom of the brain to say, oh, yeah, that's right. I know how to regulate myself. I know how to be optimal. And so looking in the mirror, it can do that. It can learn how to regulate itself more efficiently. And so it's just that idea of the non-invasive piece is really desirable for people, because it can be a little scary to be like, wait, what do you mean you're going to do something to my brain? And I feel like over the years that's been sort of the hesitancy, is like, no, but are you going to see what's going on in my brain? Or, or being afraid that, something's going to change in a negative way. But I think that learning that the capacity of the brain has the capacity to create these changes, and just like training a muscle, the brain can be trained to be more effective, more efficient, and more resilient. And it just, nothing affects your life more profoundly than training and changing your brain, and the way that you think, and the way that your nervous system operates. And I've worked with top athletes and Silicon Valley executives, and the feedback is like, wow, I'm operating from this calm center, and it allows me this space between whatever the stressor is and my reaction to the stressor, which is so powerful, right? Because if you're
Hmm.
reacting all crazily to things, and then just the ability to let things go that are no longer serving you, or like a play that didn't go well, and being able to bounce back into the game and not be
Yeah.
cycling over that in your head and ruin the whole game. It's like this resilience and flexibility, this ability to bounce back. So, yeah, it's pretty powerful.
I feel like there's a lot to that because I think intuitively a lot of people's first reaction, and something I did a lot in the earlier in my life, is want more stimulation, to be more amped up, like, drink more coffee, take more stimulants, take more supplements, do all these things. And
Yeah,
that's going to kind of give me performance and give me the edge and give me all this stuff, which, yeah, in the short term, maybe.
yeah,
But for a lot of those things, you're you're sacrificing your adrenals. You're paying a tax that some people can get away with that for a while. Some people can't get away with that for very long at all, and then it starts to create a bunch of other problems. And then you got to do other things to address those problems, and then it's like this whack-a-mole game that I
right.
see a lot of people in kind of like the alternative health world get into. Whereas I think what makes a lot more sense is like kind of what you were saying, is being more calm, learning to just chill out and have your nervous system stay more, like, I don't know, regulated or cohesive
Yeah,
or comfortable or
regulated is a good word. Yeah,
calm, or however, yeah, however we want to describe it. And then actually that in many ways gives you kind of an enhanced focus and enhanced productivity, because you're just actually more calm, which is kind of the opposite of what maybe people think as their first go-to for, enhancing productivity or
yeah.
um, that sort of thing. But I wonder if we could shift gears a little bit, and maybe you could share a little bit more about your own story and experience, because you kind of like said a lot of things and that you had done for you and your personal experience. And then I'm also curious how you found out about Neuroptimal originally.
Hmm. Yeah, so I was coming out of cancer treatments, and I was really struggling. My kids were, I guess, like 3 and 5 at the time, and so trying to function and be a mom and driving them to school and feeling anxious, and just really, I didn't know what to do with myself. And with a nutrition background, and I've always been into kind of holistic health, and all that Western medicine had to offer me was like, here, take this antidepressant and this sleep med, and I just didn't want to go that route. And so actually my aunt had called me, and she's like, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. She's like, you're not fine. I can hear it in your voice. We need to do something about this. So she had a brain tumor. Oh my gosh, it's probably 25 years ago now. But back when she had the brain tumor removed, she had gone and spoken to Dr. Dan Amen, and he said she was having
Uh,
some issues with like focus and organization and whatnot after having the surgery. And he said, okay, we'll go do neurofeedback. So she had actually explored a lot of the different types of neurofeedback technology. And so when she saw that I was struggling, she said, you might want to try this neurofeedback. And at the time, she had been trained in using Neuroptimal, and so that's how I got introduced to it.
Okay.
So yeah, and at first I didn't see it. It was like, oh, I don't know if it's really doing anything. And then I play golf, and I had heard that the founder of Neuroptimal had improved his golf game. Like he started golf at 50 and became a scratch golfer in like a year's time, and he attributes it all to Neuroptimal. So I was out on the golf course, and I'm like, whoa, that's really different. I've never hit the ball like that. And my husband and my father are like, what? What's going on? Like this effortless swing, you're hitting the ball so far. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, wait, maybe it's that neurofeedback. And I noticed that when I was up at the tee box, like my mind was quiet. I wasn't thinking like, oh, you got to do this and straighten your left arm and
Yeah.
all these things that would go through my mind. They just weren't there, and I was able
Hmm.
to just access this natural swing, just very effortlessly, like I never experienced before. And so that was kind of one of the first things that I had noticed. And then I was on a retreat for a group of young cancer survivors, and all of them we were going to bed, and all these women were like, oh, I got to take my Xanax and my Ativan and all their meds to be able to go to sleep. And
Yeah.
it occurred to me like, oh wait, that was me like a month ago, just grabbing for straws. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm sleeping. Like it just occurred to me, because it was so seamless, I didn't really recognize, wow, you're sleeping through the night and you're not anxious anymore, and these things have shifted. And so that was sort of this moment of like, okay, I went through this for a reason, through the depths of hell and cancer treatments, to find something to help others. And so in that moment, I felt like, okay, this is what I was meant to do. I need to bring this to others and help others who are coming through this journey, and not offered anything else as a solution for what they're struggling with. So I actually first started working at an integrative oncology office with it, and then I just kind of started getting busy. I opened my own office. That was in San Francisco, and I opened an office on the other side of the bay. And just fast forward, I started diving into some coaching programs, and I got involved in the biohacking scene, and was doing like the Bulletproof conference back years
Hmm.
ago, and exhibiting for Neuroptimal at those conferences, and
Cool.
just meeting people through that, and learning about all these other different technologies. And I was just really enjoying the conference scene at the time, and presenting and teaching on Neuroptimal, and met up with the Oakland A's at a conference, and they're like, hey, can we bring you out to spring training and do this there? And so that's kind of how I
Wow.
fell into the working with athletes, and worked with them back in 2019 before the pandemic. And so yeah, it's been a journey to say the least, but it's been really fun. I ran retreats for a while in Mexico, just bringing the Neuroptimal down to these wellness retreats, and that was really fun. And it's pretty transformative. Like even in a week's time of running these sessions at retreats, or being on site at spring training for a couple weeks and working with the players, they ended up keeping it for the whole season. But just seeing what they reported, even just 50 athletes, in all of them doing neurofeedback in a couple
Hmm.
weeks time, and being able to see what the feedback was with that was super interesting. And yeah, so lots of fun
That's
things.
it's a super cool story, and I mean, you definitely went through a lot, and you know, you had your own transformation, your own improvements, and it also reminds me something you didn't mention just now, but I think you mentioned to me previously is that you used to have really bad like stage fright and social
Oh,
anxiety.
yes. Yeah. Extreme, like to the point where I couldn't raise my hand in class, right? I literally got taken away from high school in an ambulance because I had a panic attack, because the teacher called on me, and I thought I was having a heart attack. I didn't know what was happening, but I had like a
Yeah.
massive panic attack, and it was that bad. So I found myself, I was at a party after I'd started the neurofeedback,
Hmm.
and people were asking me some questions or whatever, and it was like I was looking down at myself and like, wait a second, why aren't you red in the face? Why aren't you freaking out? Why aren't you like shaking right now? And you're having this confident conversation, and what is happening? So yes, after living for 33 plus years, being just kind of like locked into this shyness and fear of
Hmm.
putting myself out there, or getting on a stage, or you know, any of that. So
Right.
it's been really freeing, and I saw that with my kids as well, where
Mm.
my daughter was very very shy, and she would just cling to me, and like people would try to talk to her, and she'd like look the other way, and she's become super confident and you know, not afraid to put herself out there. And I I don't know for sure it was the neurofeedback, but we certainly saw a
For
big shift
sure.
with her when she started it, and my son as well. So for them, they've been doing it since they were like first and second grade, and they're in high school now. So they still do it. Particularly like they have a big project to work on, or
Wow.
my daughter's a competitive dancer, so before she goes out for a competition, she'll load up on her sessions, and it helps her feel like she's in flow and focused and that kind of thing. So definitely great for all ages.
Yeah, that's definitely a transformation, we could say, going from going to the hospital from a panic attack, from raising your hand in a class to like, oh yeah, I love the conference scene.
Yeah,
I was, giving presentations and meeting people and doing all this stuff. It's like, it's pretty much the exact opposite ends of the
yeah,
spectrum. So,
it's a big
yeah,
shift. When I went by myself to spring training and I was giving a presentation to all the whole team and these like Hall of Fame baseball players standing
yeah,
on the field there, I thought, okay, we've definitely like moved past some serious limitations, because I did not feel uncomfortable or, you know, slept like a baby the night before, and so
yeah.
yeah, it's pretty
That's
powerful.
that's what I think is cool about this modality in general, is that like it's not as though you had to do talk therapy for like 40 years and reprocess every bad thing that's happened to you and forgive everyone and
Yeah,
visualize yourself and all this complicated stuff, which of course has benefit and merit and helps people. I'm not implying anything bad about it. I'm just
sure.
saying this is amazing because you can just kind of correct your nervous system or your brain or whatever it is that's self-regulating, and then a lot of stuff just kind of takes care of itself,
Right, right.
which
Yeah, yeah.
which is kind of why, yeah, it really appealed to me in the first place. And there's another thing I wanted to ask you about, because you were talking about your kids were doing it, and you mentioned earlier kids with like ADD and autism, these different kinds of things. And just I'd like to hear more about that specifically because like that's what sold me on Neuroptimal in the first place. When I was on YouTube, like just watching people's testimonials or experiences with neurofeedback in general, and then also I found a whole thread of practitioners that have been using Neuroptimal.
Hmm.
And what sold me on it and what really actually moved me emotionally was there was a lady who was some kind of child and family therapist or counselor or something. I don't remember her exact title, but she was basically working with children with like developmental behavioral issues because of foster care or being adopted or different kind of instability in their family life. And then, they get to a family, but then like their behavior is crazy.
Yeah,
And then their parents, their lives are like ruined and like because of they're just having to 24/7 365 put all their attention on this kid. So that struck me because that was basically my childhood, and like that was my parents, because my brother was just absolutely awful and like wrecked our whole family dynamic, and like just put so much stress on my parents' relationship and my life and so many things which we won't get into. But I just heard that, and then she was saying that a lot of her clients are these mothers coming to her just like crying, like, thank you so much, like I have my life back, like I have a child that's not just like a demon 24/7, or just not completely just completely like checked out from the world. Like I have like a child now that I can, interact with, and we can live, and we're a family, and it's all this stuff. And then I was like, all right, this might be, there's something I need to go deeper in, because that just hit me because of just my childhood and my experience, and also my like developmental and behavioral stuff. And I've had a lot of clients over the years reach out to me, because I sell mushrooms and different kinds of herbal supplements. So many moms being like, my son or my daughter is like has autism or these behavioral things. Like, what can I do? Like I'm trying to figure something out, and like the doctors and the system and people I'm working with is just not helping. And it's like, and I've never really had that many. I've not had that much confidence to be like, oh, do this. This will help. Because I'm just like, yeah, I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of why I wanted to talk about that for all of those reasons. And I think I mean, I just feel like that's a demographic that really needs a lot of help. Because I mean, I saw firsthand how difficult that can be, as a parent to have a child like that. And I've been that child as well. So I know how uncomfortable it is on both sides. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah.
no, certainly. And I think typically I always recommend that the whole family train. So
Uh,
oftentimes, the parent will call and like Johnny's, this, that, and the other thing, and we can't deal. And well, a lot of times it's the parent's energy that is affecting the child's energy, right? Because we all co regulate together. And so,
hmm
um, even I'll give you an example. Like when I started doing the neurofeedback, and I was going through cancer treatments. I had a lot on my plate. So
hmm
when my kids are pushing my buttons, I might react and get upset. And I found that when I started doing the neurofeedback, their behavior just improved like overnight. It was like, oh, why is this happening? Because they
Okay.
weren't getting the same reaction out of me, right?
Mm.
So then they would go push my husband's buttons. And then they'd say, Daddy needs a session. I said, why does Daddy need a session? Because he's yelling at us again. So they were little, but they made this connection with, like, oh, he's more calm and regulated.
Mm.
Not that our house was like this chaotic place of yelling and whatnot, but, it's, little kids and there's a lot going on. And
Right.
um, we all react the way that we were taught to react. And so I think that this helps you shift the way that you react because you're able to react in a more calm, regulated way. And so, yeah, definitely recommending that the parents train with the child. And even if you can't get the child on there, train the parents. And,
Yeah.
maybe you'll get there with the child. But I've seen a lot of just incredible things over the years with kids, and my son in particular had extreme like sensory issues. He couldn't have his hair cut or go into a movie theater or parades. Like his nervous system was just overloaded by those things, and if his teacher would say, well, if he could just focus, and then at home he'd be like hyper focused on something and you couldn't break his attention.
Mm.
And it was completely transformative for him, the sensory issues. And the sensory issues are big, and kids on the spectrum often have the sensory issues where they can't have their head touched, and different like noises are very agitating. And so a lot of parents come and they're like, well, how am I even going to get the sensors or the ear clips on, because they won't go for that. But typically the nervous system calms down enough that even after a couple sessions they don't care about the sensors anymore. So with him, we saw the sensory stuff went away very quickly. His teacher grabbed me and was like, what happened to this kid? And like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I don't understand. You're delivering this mature little boy to class, and he's just so focused, and he's taking his time, and he's like a different kid. I don't understand. And then at the same time, my daughter's teacher grabbed me and was like, what happened to her? She's like blossoming overnight. She was in first grade, but she's like, I don't know. Her reading and writing is taking off. And so they didn't know what I was doing, but they both observed this change in the kids. And I've had kids on the spectrum, kids with autism that were nonverbal. That um, after a handful of sessions, this one kid came in, and I would talk to him, but he was nonverbal. He wouldn't say anything to me. And he came in for one session. He's like, "Oh, hi, Angela. Mom went to get a coffee. I'm gonna grab a book." And I'm like, so, needless to say, they bought a system and they train at home now. But because it's an ongoing wellness tool for them. But it's pretty amazing. I mean, what can happen in a calm, regulated nervous system is pretty life changing. So whether who knows whether part of it's birth trauma that creates dysregulation or what it is. We don't have to know the reason, and
Right.
that's kind of the nice part too. Is you don't need to know like why does my child have these behavior issues, or why does this child that I adopted have issues going to sleep or with behavior and reactivity. It doesn't really matter, because if they do the neuroptimal, it's just providing this feedback to their brain that's helping to calm it and regulate it. And kids' brains are so resilient and flexible, so they
Yeah.
just shift so quickly. think of it like because it's a training and it's a learned process. So kind of like learning to ride a bike or learning to read, the brain learns this new way of being and it can't unlearn it. So kids' brains learn much quicker, or they learn new languages a lot
Yeah.
faster than older folks do. So same kind of thing where it's a learned process, and with that, maybe older people are a little bit more stuck in their ways and might take a little longer to shift. Not always, but you know, it's definitely see really cool shifts with kids.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like that's definitely, I just wish more people knew about that who needed it, basically. Because it's just, I mean, I can think about even like my brother, because we're growing up in Indiana in the 80s and in the 90s.
Hmm.
I mean, there was nothing. There was none
Yeah,
of this. It
yeah,
was just kind of like, yeah, we don't know.
yeah.
I mean,
He's that way, and we don't know how to fix it.
yeah. So, I mean, it's amazing in the time we live in now. There's so many options and people have so much more understanding of things. And there's just, yeah, I just hope that over the next, few years and the next decade or whatever, more people can learn about this who really need it and can really benefit from it. Because, kids are the future. They're going to be the ones, running the world for better or worse, like when we're old. So it's like,
Right, and if they can, be like it can take a lifetime, or not. Maybe you don't even get there in a lifetime, but
yeah,
the personal growth journey of becoming confident and being able to put yourself out there and all these things, if you can empower a child from the time that they're young, and what a difference they could make, right? And so yeah, no, that's why we
Spe-
want it everywhere. We want people to come and train their brain, and you know we welcome whole families to come in, and so
yeah, that's actually a really good point, and it reminds me, I think, of an interview I watched with the founders where they were talking about pretty much that exact idea about the whole family dynamic.
hmm.
And they were saying that the traditional model is like, oh, this one person has this one disorder or problem. And they're
Yeah.
like, actually, that disorder is in itself a kind of order. It's a kind
Hmm.
of repeatable, like adaptive thing to
Hmm.
something.
Yeah.
And then it's like you really have to look at the whole dynamic at whole as a whole thing, not just point at one little symptom or one like hyper fixate on one little thing, which is kind of very often, kind of the modern mainstream medical model is just this one thing is evil, and if we get rid of it, then
Yeah.
everything else will get better. And it's like sometimes that's true, but in
Yeah.
many instances, you have to kind of look at the whole system, which I guess is the whole idea of holistic health, at least
Right.
ideally.
Yeah, and I mean, we see whole as a family system when people start training together, a workplace. I've done like corporate workplace training, and people get into more of a team flow or a sports team, and because you all start to regulate
Yeah.
together more effectively, and it really changes the whole dynamic. And a lot of families will tell me, oh my gosh, our house, like everything's just smoother. I don't know how to describe it other than like everything's just calmer and smoother in our house.
I think that also brings up another really good point, especially if people have family members or friends or significant others in their lives that have some disharmony. I think it's easy sometimes to try to want that other person to change or want them to be better or want them to fix, and it's all their fault, it's all their whatever. Which of course, obviously, in situations that is true. But what I think is also really important is something we've kind of touched on many times is how dynamics can change when actually your system changes,
Yeah.
and how when people give you a certain stimulus, your response becomes different. And
Hmm.
then when they're not getting the typical response that they're used to, they
Yeah.
start to sometimes be like, okay.
Yeah.
It's like, someone's used to being able to push your buttons and they go and push them and you're just like, okay, anything else? And they're just like, and now they're there kind of just exposed. And also, too, just if you're actually more calm and focused, that can change things. And I've just seen that for myself as my nervous system has changed over the years.
Hmm.
My relationship with, basically everyone has changed as well without them really changing at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important point for people, if they're on some kind of healing or self-improvement kind of journey.
Sure. Yeah. And if somebody like comes to see you, like for example, clients come in and if I'm all hyped up and dysregulated, how are they going to be calm and be able to share what's going on for them? And so I think we do that for others in life and holding this calm space to be able to, for people to be able to share or, you know, so yeah, it's interesting, but I definitely agree.
Yeah, I feel like kind of the last thing I'd like to say, and then we can kind of wrap up, and you can tell people where they can find more about what you're doing and contact you and learn more about Neuroptimal. I think the biggest thing is like it's easy to forget our actual capacity to heal and to regulate,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty profound, I think. And I've seen it in myself and lots of my clients and people that I talk to. I mean, I did a podcast a few days ago, and this guy was saying that when he was like 11, this one of the best psychiatrists in the country told his mom that he would never be able to exist outside of like a full-time care facility. He would never have a normal job. He would never have normal relationships. Just all this crazy stuff. And then they put him on the heaviest like tranquilizer that they had. I can't remember what it was called. But he said he remembered going as a kid going to the doctor and being like, the doctor's yelling at his secretary. He's all stressed. He's all worked up. She's all stressed. She's all worked up. And he's like a little kid being like, how am I learning about health from these people who are not even healthy at all? Um, and then, he got to be a little bit later. He changed his diet. He did all these things. And he met another psychologist and gave him, all these tests and all these things. And it was like, yeah, I don't know what they were talking about. I was like, you're fine. Like, you don't have any markers of any of these things. So that's just one story. I mean, we could go back and forth for days about all the wild things we've seen, but I think that's just a really important thing for people to remember if they are at a low point, is
Yeah.
that there are legitimate options that can actually help, and our ability to heal and to recalibrate and regulate is pretty high, despite what you might be told from whoever else in your life. So I think that's an important thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that oftentimes people feel very stuck and to realize that and keep in mind that most of our suffering is worrying about the past or worrying about the future, and that if you can do something to be more calm and regulated in the present moment, most of your suffering is not there anymore. So yeah, and the ability to become unstuck really changes things for people, and just like even like little shifts, like hey, I did one session and I noticed, you know, um, I felt more calm afterwards. Well, that's something, right? And
Hmm.
so yeah, I think just empowering people that they have the capacity to heal, absolutely, and
And I think one thing that's really important is it it's easier to solve problems and look at situations in a more productive way when your nervous system is more calm and is more regulated. Because
yeah,
it almost, I mean, for better or worse, our system is kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's just like whatever you have, you just tend to get more of, for
yeah,
better or worse. At least for me, because I was super angry for most of my teens and my early adult life. So it's just like, and what I realized when I got older is, oh, I was actually creating the vast majority of the conflict that I experienced through my attitudes, through my behaviors, through my responses, through all the stuff I was carrying into the situation that kind of just limited it. So it had to kind of go down in a certain way. And I'm like,
yeah,
wow, that was all basically avoidable and preventable had I just actually not been in that state. And then I got into a more calm state and I realized, oh, so
well, even our beliefs, right? Our belief that I have to be angry because this is my world. And so being able to, or my belief that I had to be shy because that's what people told me as a child. Oh, she's shy. She can't talk to you. And so we take on whatever was said to us as a child oftentimes, and it becomes this pattern for us. And so however we can break those patterns, because we're not those patterns. We are whatever we want to be, and it's
Yep.
just breaking free of those beliefs and
It's
moving forward.
definitely, I feel like we're both definitely examples of that because um, just like you, I was painfully shy when I was a kid. I mean, I clung to my mom. And I remember I would always just remove myself from situations. Like I was just so detached and disassociated, where it was like people would talk about me like I wasn't there, like in third person, but I was there in the situation, but they would talk about me like I wasn't because I was just so checked out. And then I
Yeah.
remember something in college where like my brain flipped and all of a sudden I became able to actually speak and do all these things. And now like, I have a YouTube channel and do
Yeah.
all this other stuff. And I've given lectures and taught classes and whatever. So it's like
Yeah.
same thing. People are like, oh, you're shy. And then, all these other things. My parents, I would say things and ask questions and be curious. My parents would be like, oh, stop, you're being a know-it-all. Oh, you think you're smarter than everyone else. They would say all
Mm,
this stuff. So I'd just be like, oh, maybe they're right. And then as I got older, I actually realized, no, my questions were valid. Those were useful.
yeah.
Like I'm not an idiot. So, so I mean, it's just saying, I'm just saying that because, things can really change is the point.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, I feel like we could definitely talk about this stuff for quite a long time, but I would like for you to share how people could learn more about what you're doing and find you and contact you. If they want to learn more about Neuroptimal, if they want to, or if they're in the Bay Area, they can check out your your
Yeah, if they're in the
brain
Bay
spa.
Area, they can check out the Bay Area Brain Spa if they're looking to come in for any in-person services, and if you're looking to rent or get more information on Neuroptimal or assistance with purchasing, they can reach out to Mind Balance Neuro is the website. I don't know if you'll put it on the show
Yeah,
notes or
I'll
whatever.
link it.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump on a call, or you can book a consult on my website, and I'd be happy to share more. And I ship the rentals throughout the U.S., so if that's something, and people can rent for a month and train the whole family unlimited, so it can really make a difference. So, yeah,
Yeah, I definitely recommend anyone listening to contact you because, like I said, that's how we connected. You answered a bunch of my questions. Some of them were kind of kind of random, but I feel like it's something like this. It's not like you're just purchasing a toaster,
yeah,
or like a
yeah,
phone. Like it's a little more of a intricate, involved, device. So I think that's why it's useful to have someone like yourself that can kind of assist people through the process and answer any questions because it's kind of a new, it's a new concept. Like neurofeedback is not really that common, it's not
yeah.
that popular yet.
Yeah,
Um,
I talk to a lot of husbands for the wife that the husband doesn't think it's the right thing, and so um, it's fun. The dynamics of getting the rental into the house, and so everybody has to be on board. But yeah,
right.
I'm happy to have that conversation. So yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time and coming on. I feel like definitely covered a lot of different things and, shared a little bit about each of our stories and just illustrated and hopefully, drove home and communicated the power and the just how awesome this technology is. I mean, that's the only reason I'm into it, and the only reason I'm doing this now is because I like genuinely think it's like great, and I wish more people knew about it.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, that's
kind
the only
of
reason I went around to conferences and got confident enough to get on a stage, because I felt like I have to say this from the rooftops, because there's people out there. If it touches one person and one person's life changes, then as a result, then it's worth it. And so I hope that some of your listeners today hear about it and, find it to be something that's helpful for them.
yeah, absolutely, and everything will be linked below. I'll link to Angela's website, and you can contact her from there and learn more. But thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.